Hello, everyone, and welcome back to my channel. I am Christopher Moonlight, and I am here today with my co-host Scribe Light.
Good morning, everybody.
And a very special guest that I'm very excited to have here. We have Shelby Schultz from Look Dine-In Cinema, and we're going to talk about something that I have wanted to happen for ages, which is, what do I call it? A decentralization is beginning in entertainment. And the different entities like movie theaters and independent filmmakers are starting to come together to offer new things for audiences. So I'm very excited to have you here, Shelby. Thank you so much for joining us. First of all, I want to hear a little bit about you. This is a family business. So how did this all start for you?
Yeah, so I grew up, working in the theater. My dad started the first dine-in theater with freshly prepared food in Dallas, Texas in 1999, right before I was born. So it's kind of been a lifelong journey, watching that concept become more popularized and more common, and doing everything from helping hand tile the bathroom at 3 years old to hanging out in the projection booth when we used to have film, and then watching the transition to digital and how that allowed us to have a lot more different content in our building. And yeah, so, coming out of the pandemic, we really wanted to revitalize the industry and create a new concept that was technology forward and filmmaker forward. So we started Look together, and I've been doing programming for a long time, which pretty much means I do all the film selection and am in charge of fitting as much great stuff for our audiences into our schedule.
Wow. So I think it's safe to say that filmmaking is a way, or not filmmaking, but movie theaters, it was a way of life for you. You kind of just grew up in that environment.
Definitely. And I went to film school at Northwestern and, have met through that and through living in Los Angeles for the last 2.5 years. People who work in every aspect of the industry and really have an appreciation for how much work goes into making a movie, and passion and money, of course. And I think it's really important that we're a home for people and that people have the opportunity to see their movie on the big screen. Because I know when I was making short films, it felt very important to me to have that community aspect.
Now, something I'm curious about is, I've worked as an usher in movie theaters before, a couple. First, AMC. When I first moved to Texas, I needed a night job so I could raise my kids, and that was a lot of fun interacting with the audience. And then I worked at an Evo a few years back in the evenings. For me, the most interesting part was just interacting with the audience, like going in to do theater checks, seeing how they were responding to the movies, seeing them come in and out, having conversations with them, gauging their excitement, both going in and coming out. Do you feel like you have, in terms of the relationship with the audience, do you feel like you have maybe a special relationship with the audience because you were around them your entire life?
Yeah, I mean, it's really incredible. And I get the opportunity to travel to our various locations, which have very different audiences. So some of my favorite things that bring me the most passion to do are to just sit at our bar in our lobby and, talk to people about what movie they're going to see and why they're excited about it. And my friends hate it, but I love to sit through all the trailers and I love to hear all the reactions. Sometimes I'm not super excited about a movie, and then I get to hear someone verbally enthusiastically respond, which, proves to me that they're very excited about something because, they can't control it. They have to say it out loud in the theater. So I just love sitting through the trailers and seeing what people are excited about or reacting to. I always feel that great connection. Sometimes you feel like Big Brother when you're in the projection booth watching over the audience, and you kind of have a almost bird's eye view. But I love to be on the ground and, tearing tickets as much as possible as well.
when I was tearing tickets, or I didn't do the projector booth that much, but I would go in. I was always the one cleaning up after the audiences, so you could tell kind of by how messy the theater was too, how much fun they had. But yeah, I'm a bit of a trailer junkie too. I hear people complain about it, but I like to see what's coming. And if there's a batch of not good trailers, that's usually kind of disappointing for me. But I like to go see movies with my daughter, my older daughter, and I kind of have the father-daughter day where we go and we watch the trailers. And I'll look over to her every time there's a trailer to see how she reacts. You know, she loves Five Nights at Freddy's, so she loved that trailer. And other trailers we'll just make fun of. So,
that's my favorite part.
Yeah.
It kind of is that I know people complain about trailers. I feel like it's the border where you're leaving your reality and what, you know, you're leaving at the door what you came in with, and you're able to, you know, sometimes by the time the trailer starts, I'm like, what movie am I seeing again? And I love that feeling, because then it just takes everything, you know, every preconceived notion about the movie away, and you're just, you know, present to watch it unfold.
So this is really interesting to me. What in your mind makes for a good trailer, and also what's in a trailer do you feel just can kill a movie?
Oh yeah, I mean, I feel like for me, the best trailers encapsulate the vibe of the movie and give you enough to grasp onto without telling the whole story of what's going to happen. I think with kids movies, you can be a little bit more forthcoming about the plot points. I think it's helpful, but you know, I think a really successful trailer recently was Weapons from Warner Brothers. That movie has a lot of hype in Hollywood already, but the trailer, you're like, oh my gosh, how could this be happening? I really want to know. And they don't give you any more information than what you need to be hooked. So I loved hearing reactions to that trailer. But I think a bad trailer, you know, I think it's hard when a movie gives away too much of the plot. Sometimes, you know, I don't think a trailer's been tested where there will be a joke that doesn't land. You know, for example, there was a kids movie recently that had a joke that kids were reacting negatively to in a lot of the auditoriums I was in. And I was like, okay, I'm really excited for them to release the new cut of a different cut of this trailer so I can replace this one. But it's interesting. I think too, like a bad trailer doesn't establish what you're selling. And I always talk about with people, especially with big Hollywood movies, there has to be a reason why. Why do I need to go see this? We live in an attention economy. And, you know, I'm a movie buff. I'm watching 5 movies a week at least, but most people aren't. And, you know, some of my friends from high school, we go to the movies once a year. So why do they need to go see this movie? Whether it's a outstanding performance through someone, or awards buzz, or the cinematography is beautiful, or the story has a really important message that's relevant to what we're living through. I think you have to tell me why I need to see that movie. And a lot of the big franchises that we see fail, it's because they don't give us a reason why we need to go see it in the trailer, and instead just try to tell you what the story is, but not, you know, tell you need to go see this movie for this reason.
Yeah, a trailer should be bait, not a meal, because otherwise there's no point in actually going and seeing the thing.
Totally.
That's you know, to me as well, I think trailers are real. I've edited my own trailers for my first movie, and it was extremely difficult for me because I had made, you know, essentially a horror film that was someone described it as an art film described as a horror film. And I thought I had done a great job with the movie. I'm very proud of that. But editing the trailer was very difficult because I wanted to give the mood, but I realized my movie wasn't very, you know, plot-wise, it was very visual. So, you know, I was doing a lot of show, don't tell, and I realized I don't have any characters saying anything that helps me in the trailer to give the audience an idea of what they want. And so I cut a couple of trailers, 2 or 3 trailers, each one trying to see if it got a better reaction. And weirdly, for me, the one I thought was the worst trailer got the most views. So, I think sometimes maybe I should get someone else to edit the trailer. And I also think that, you get situations like Sonic the Hedgehog where there was such a viscerally negative trailer reaction that they went like, oh, we know could be better. And then they went and fixed it. But adversely, I see people, I'll have a reaction to a trailer and I'll give them like, I think it could be this, or I wasn't really feeling it. And they'll be like, no, that's, that's what I think it should be. And then I'm like, well, okay. But as far as, with Hollywood right now, like my understanding is, and you correct me if I'm wrong, they're not providing theaters with enough content. And when they do deliver, a lot of times it is kind of ignoring the audience. They kind of just put stuff out there. What was it really that made you and, I don't know if you work directly with your father on this stuff or he kind of leaves it to you to figure out, what the programming should be, but what was the point where you started seeing the value in courting independent filmmakers and making spaces available for them?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of an interesting time for that question because I do think the studios actually have provided us with a ton of content the last few weeks. But coming out of the pandemic, starting doing this job, we're at a time when we had to be really creative and really open to whichever distributors had content to work with. And we were playing movies that, ordinarily would go day and date on streaming or, maybe not be traditional theatrical releases. I do think the studios put a lot of thought into what, the audiences want. The problem is the production process and turnaround process takes so long that sometimes, the boat's already moved on. And I don't blame them for not having control over that. But I think, indie films, there's a lot less at stake. Failure looks a lot different. I think some of these movies, it's all about the expectation. And if we're expecting $100 million opening, it only opens to 80, that's a failure. I would never say that about an indie film. If it opened at 80 million, it would be incredible. So, I do think, I don't want to dog on the studios at all. I think they have a really difficult job and they have to think about a lot of different synergies and revenue streams. But I love working with independent filmmakers because they've really thought of their community when making a movie. And I really love finding filmmakers, who locally have made movies to work with us because they'll bring out their community. Like we'll play movies at our Reston, Virginia theater because the filmmakers from there, someone involved in the movies from there, and it will sell out. And, it doesn't really make sense at our other locations, but it's really awesome that the community gets to share the movie together. But yeah, in terms of how we book our theater, we work with a film buyer who's awesome, and his job is he negotiates with the studios and gives us updates in terms of what their policies and expectations are for films. It's a political game, I always say. There's a lot of considerations you have to have with your schedule. But we booked our theater where we have an extra screen bookmarked, not for studio product, but for us to be flexible and play repertory movies and do independent releases and, have Q&As and special programming. And I think that's very important so that your theater, doesn't feel like every other theater in the area. And I'm very mindful of, we have a subscription program and I want people to feel like they're getting value out of it, that there's a lot of diversity of content. So I hate when I go to the theater and I'm like, I've already seen every single movie we're playing right now. That's like the worst thing to me. So, how do you diversify it and how do you find filmmakers who can bring in really great content and give them the opportunity to provide something new to the audience?
Yeah, that's, to me, Matt, you said so much there that really I've been thinking about, and there is really a lot to unpack. I mean, I have seen movie theaters, and Scribe, I think, this is a conversation you've had on your channel or maybe on Midnight's Edge, because they talk about movies there more. But, through the last few years, I've seen more concerts on screens. I've seen sporting events. I've seen all of these things, independent films that are, like you said, locals. They're all seeming to be, it's not just about what's playing on the screen, because we've got so much of that at all the different video on demand services. But the thing that's kind of missing there, and the thing I discovered, because I was really excited to get my movie on video on demand, and I got it on Tubi and Amazon and Apple TV, and I was really excited about all of that. But then once it was there, I was realizing I'm not getting the feedback. I'm not seeing my audience have a visceral reaction to it. There's no community around it. When you're in a theater with a bunch of people, you're having a shared experience.
Right.
And, it's I feel like, whether it's sporting events or concerts or independent films, I think that the goal, well, when we're speaking specifically to independent films, the goal is for that filmmaker to be able to bring a unique experience to the audience that they can't get at home, or can't even normally get with a normal Hollywood movie, because that's playing across screens across the nation. But the experience they're going for is right then and there. It's special. And I was wondering if you kind of comment as to what, when you see a good independent film and you see the audience reacting, and what the filmmaker is doing, like, what are those things that you feel really stand out as unique and make you want to have that film in your theaters? Which my understanding too is you're doing Fridays and Saturdays, which is unheard of. Usually an independent film gets like a Tuesday night or something.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a lot of different answers to that question. I'll back on one person. I'll answer multiple paths if that's okay.
Of course.
The first example that came to mind is for a long time in our Glendale, California theater, we've been partnering with a filmmaker to release his movies for his community. He'll do a premiere at our theater before it goes on Tubi, the following week. And we love having events with them. They always bring out a huge crowd. It's always really fun. So we were really excited for them when they were like, hey, we're really loving this theatrical experience. So we've decided to release our next movie theatrically. We're going to have 2,000 runs. That's huge. We have this much money going into it. And, we really want to partner with you to make sure it's a success. And then I was really excited that they reached out to me and said, hey, can you put your trailer on screen? We're going to come to the theater and we want to watch a movie and we want to hear how people are reacting to our trailer. And that was really cool, because when I talked to them, I said, hey, go see how people are reacting to your trailer. What's resonating, what's not. It's a sci-fi heavy movie. They've done amazing special effects, but you want to make sure that that's resonating with the audience. So it was really cool that they were willing to come in, the filmmaker and his producers, and they watched a movie and got to see the trailer. But, I think that's really important. They're invested in that. It was great to see them kind of transition from their streaming deal to wanting to have this theatrical release. I also just try to tell filmmakers that being able to point to theatrical box office and success makes a huge difference in selling your streaming rights. So if you're able to have that opportunity to make some box office and show that people are excited about a movie, it can sweeten your deal on the other end if you're selling it for streaming. So I think that's also something I suggest people keep in mind. But we have I have a friend named Andrew who's great, and he went to South by Southwest and saw a movie, and he was like, hey, I know that director's name. We used to talk on film message boards when we were in high school. So he texted the guy and he said, "Hey, I just saw your movie at South by. What's your plan for the theatrical release?" And he said, "Oh, well, we didn't really think that was accessible to us." And Andrew was like, "I own a drive-in in Houston. Like, let's, chat about this." And Andrew ended up helping use their social media following to figure out where they had the biggest audiences, and reached out to me and said, "Hey, will you support us?" And, with our flexible schedule, I was like, I'll give them some shows, at random wherever we have space. And every single one sold out pretty much, because these people had a big following and people are interested in streaming their movie. Watching the movie in the theater. And not just watching it on YouTube, which was their original plan. So it was really great to get to, bring people together who are big fans of them to watch this. So that really inspired me, like, we're doing the right thing. This is really important. And, I had a great conversation with them after the release to kind of recap how everything went and how they felt about it. And they were like, "Yeah, we want to share our upcoming slate with you and get some feedback about what you think works and talk about, what distributing this would look like." But I think a lot of people feel like if they don't have connections to big distributors, that their movie kind of gets lost. I think the benefit of working with a distributor is that they have the relationships to get you in theaters. They'll handle collecting the money, which, as easy as we try to make it, is still difficult at times. And, they can insist your, trailer gets on screen, that you get a certain number of shows. But, it doesn't have to be that way if you work with the right partner who's willing to do those things for you. And we can work together to market it. But I really look for filmmakers who have a lot of energy behind marketing their own movies. And when I went to South by this year, there was one movie called Caper. They had posters everywhere. If you were at the festival this year and you didn't see a poster for Caper, you must have had your eyes closed walking around. So in every line for every screening, they were handing out their merch and stuff. So I talked to them after the screening. I was like, "I love your movie. It's hilarious. And I just love how much energy you're putting into a screening, where I know if I put this on screen on a Friday night or a Saturday night, that you're going to make sure that just as many people are there as would be for a studio movie." So, I'm willing to give them that opportunity because I trust them that they're going to bring their audience out. Sometimes you agree to do that and it fails, and that's okay. But when it succeeds, it's really awesome. And, someone feels like, "Hey, this is a special place where I can see something I can't see it anywhere else." So, we're willing to do weekends because I'm doing that because I really think people are going to show up. And a lot of times we ask for filmmakers to do Q&As alongside those, because that's what really makes it cool, is like getting to hear from the filmmaker or the cast about, why they made this movie. And for some people, that's not accessible. And so it's really awesome when we can provide that opportunity for our guests.
Yeah, man. Again, you said so much that has kind of got my brain going. And again, I think that's really the crux of it for the audience is you might put something on video on demand and, you're ready to fall asleep, it's late or something, you're maybe not as willing to give the movie a chance too far into it before you decide to turn it off. But when you go into a theater and everyone's buzzing and you're making the commitment to it, that I think is what makes it special. There's certainly times where I've sat down for a movie in a theater going like, "I don't know about this," but I stuck with it and had the experience and had fun. The marketing now, that's a huge thing, and working with producers. So again, another two-part question. I know that a lot of indie filmmakers these days, if you go to different indie filmmaker groups, are very gun shy about distribution companies, because a lot of times they're getting, nickeled and dimed on, different contractual things, and they just never end up seeing any money from their movie and feel like their movie is completely out of their control. On the flip side of that, you get a movie like the Terrifier franchise, which just went gangbusters every time, to the point where, even though it's still an independent film and has a limited release compared to most Hollywood films, it's still showing in theaters across the country. You've got celebrities wearing Terrifier t-shirts. That's most famously, there's a wrestler who's very popular. Her name's Rhea Ripley, who's begging those filmmakers to, like, please kill me in your next Terrifier movie. So that's kind of like the dream in terms of marketing and distribution and that sort of thing. Do you have any specific advice for independent filmmakers who want to get their films into theaters? Like, what are the things that really can kind of help them have? And I apologize if you can hear my dog's toenails tapping in the background. What are some of the things that you would really say to filmmakers to get them, to tell them, like, here's what you do, here's what's going to make you appealing to us. Here's what's going to make you appealing to the audience. Here's how you satisfy the audience also without burning yourself out. Because a lot of indie filmmakers are, they've got jobs and that sort of thing. So they can't, like Peter Hoyaguchi, who's doing The Occult, is an exception, because he's literally telling people, I'm not going to show this movie on VOD. There might not ever be a VOD. There might not even be physical media. It's a theatrical experience. And he's literally driving from theater to theater across the country to make sure he's there for every showing. So that's pretty radical in itself, but amazing. So, yeah, I know I said a lot again. I apologize. But what are your feelings on those points?
Yeah, I mean, I think Terrifier is a really interesting example, because I think it's a huge example of how do you make a movie that has a reason you must see it. So I remember my brother, who's 9.5 years younger than me, telling me he had to go see that movie because he heard people were throwing up with how disgusting it was, which, like, sounds, not maybe what I want to see, but, to him, that made it really cool. He was like, it must be really scary. And the most recent one was distributed with Iconic, who's a great partner with us. And the way they did the release is, they said, hey, studio movies might get in the way of the release. We're going to provide flexibility on the schedule where you don't have to commit to playing it for a full screen every single day. That way we can get into more theaters and give more people the opportunity to watch this movie. Of course, I saw that was coming out and said, Terrifier 3 is going to be huge. We're playing that on a full schedule because people want to see it. But most people who do my job are not young people. Most of them are over 50. They're very similar demographic, and they all talk to each other. So it can become a little bit of an echo chamber. So I think it's really important when I'm traveling to our theaters or going into a theater to ask people, what are you excited about? Why do you want to see that movie? Listen to how people are reacting to trailers, because otherwise you can be in the LA echo chamber where you're like, everyone wants to see this movie. There's billboards for it everywhere in Los Angeles, but no one in Dallas, Texas, where I'm from, has heard of it. So, I think it's really important to get those perspectives. But yeah, Terrifier was awesome. And I think the flexible schedule allowed them to get a lot more runs than they would have otherwise. In terms of what Peter's doing, I think it's really awesome. And I was really confident in working with him because I knew he was going to bring out an audience, for whatever time we gave him, because he does a great job marketing himself and his film. I think for anyone looking to get started directly distributing something, I really encourage them to try and make relationships with their local theater. The bigger the chain is, maybe the more bureaucracy there is. I think it's also important to be mindful that I think a lot of people don't understand the politics behind programming a theater. One of the things I would consider is the more screens a theater has, the easier it is to get a spot. So a lot of our awesome indie art house theaters, I went to college in Chicago and we go to the Music Box all the time. They only have 2 screens. It's really hard to get on those screens. They're booking it weeks, if not months out. So, if you can find a location like our Tyson's location that has 14 screens, we have a lot of space and flexibility to take a risk and give someone an opportunity. So I think, think about that definitely when you're reaching out. If you can find a local theater that's a multiplex and has a lot of screens, that's a great place to start a relationship. And, you can also try to get in with the theater if they're not as responsive as we are. We're very responsive to if people reach out on guest services. But if not, go to the film festivals they have, if they have them, go in the theater and talk to the staff. If the team there's behind it, like, hopefully they'll hear you out. But I really encourage you, be part of the community of that theater, and also try to figure out what's working at that theater. You can click through and see, oh, this movie is very similar to mine. Is it selling well at the theater? A lot of independent filmmakers will use comps for me that are movies that have, 100 times the budget of their movie. And it's not really, a realistic comp. I understand what they're going for because they're trying to show me the vibe. But, I think if you can point to, hey, this kind of movie does really well for you. This is, can we get a trailer up in front of that? Can I hand out pamphlets after promoting my movie? Can I put, my little postcards or whatever on the tables, while that movie's coming out? I think it's a really great opportunity. So be aware of what's coming out, what you'll be competing with. We try to counter program. So, if you have a scary movie and there's not one coming out that weekend, you're going to be more successful than going up against Terrifier or something big like that. And, I would just say, try to connect with your local theater. If they're especially just one location, I think, they're doing it because they love movies. They're not a corporation. So I think they'll be a big supporter of yours if you give them the opportunity.
That's really good information, especially when you talk about counter programming. Because it's like Terrifier. One of the things I really noticed about the Terrifier franchise is it's offering something that Hollywood isn't. Not that Hollywood isn't offering horror movies, but Terrifier is offering an extreme horror movie where Hollywood likes to play it a bit more safe. Mm-hmm. Terrifier is going to be offensive. It's going to be as graphic as all get out. It's going to break taboos that Hollywood, normally wouldn't do. And that's something that I feel as an independent film, it can offer an audience that they're not getting from Hollywood. So rather than, like you said, you get comps of people trying to essentially compete with a Hollywood movie on an independent budget. And of course, the audience is just going to go, well, why do I want that when I've got the big Hollywood version of that right here? Do you feel like when you're looking for movies and, by the way, I'm also interested to know what kind of movies you like. But do you see in a movie, you're like, oh, okay, this is something that an independent movie can offer? Usually in my mind, it's like, I can get something maybe a bit sexier from an independent film, or more violent, or on a subject that Hollywood is not usually willing to touch. And that might not be so much something extreme or offensive, but it might just be, you get more independent, say, Christian films, or, independent movies made by Black creators. I noticed that Tubi has kind of made a home, even though that's not theaters. They've made a home for a lot of Black creators, and they've had extreme success with that. To the fact that there's whole online groups that are dedicated towards those movies. Do you think that that's something that if you're going to bring a film to you, if someone's going to bring a film to you, or even make a film that, or decide what kind of film they're going to make, do you think that that's something they should be thinking about?
Totally, you're hitting the nail on the head. So, there's a lot of groups that are underrepresented in what Hollywood's putting out. And, I'm very mindful of what our demographics are for our theaters, and they're very different depending on the theater. But a lot of theater chains do shy away from the Black community, and I think that's really horrible. And our theaters really embrace the Black community and welcome them in and go into areas where there are a lot of members of the Black community. And so we always do really well in those movies. And I think part of it is also that audience is underserved and they show up. And so when we do have the opportunity to play Black-led, Black-directed films, I'm always really excited by that. We have a few examples coming up. We have The Life Coach coming up. We have Run coming up. And yeah, we're always looking for opportunities to support Black filmmakers because they do really well at our theaters. But on the flip side of that, we have some theaters where it's very religious conservative and there's not, a lot of religious offerings. And they, not to generalize, but there are a lot of people who go to our theaters who tell me, hey, I'm coming out for The Chosen or King of Kings because I feel like everything Hollywood makes is not representative of my ideology or, it's too liberal or whatever they think about it. And, how can we find movies that are, speaking to their experience? And, there is a lot of smaller religious distributors to work with. But I do think, having a genre or a specific voice is important. And, in LA, I think, a lot of the programmers are maybe like not as open to playing queer films because a lot of the big chains are not based out of LA. So, we had a really great experience with the movie Lavender Men, which is, about a Black non-binary person and set in theater. It's maybe a specific audience, but we had a great, run of it in New York and LA. And I really enjoyed getting to meet the people who got to see that because it's, a character you don't really get to see on screen often, very underrepresented. So, I think there's a variety. And in terms of my taste, I have to be really open to every kind of movie in my job. And, I would say my personal preferences that I have to keep in mind is I love musicals. Anything with music, I will cry. I was not super excited to see Better Man when I was invited to the screening. And then I spent the last 40 minutes of the movie crying and spent weeks of my life on TikTok defending the movie in the comments and telling everyone they needed to go see it. So much that a bunch of Robbie Williams fan accounts follow me. So, I think that's a movie where the marketing did a disservice, and I encourage everyone to watch it. That's my soapbox. I'll get off of it now, but it's a great movie.
I will say this. Chris Gore and Alan Ng on Film Threat on their live stream, who had no idea who Robbie Williams is, or at least I don't think they did, or maybe they had a cursory knowledge, both went to bat for that movie.
Yeah.
We have no idea about this person, but this was a good movie, and they advocated for it as well. So that's it's interesting because we have a culture that kind of there's how would I explain it? Like, I don't know. Describe what do you call it when you have like even in the more independent spheres like the YouTube spheres, you kind of get a consensus. And then you have a minority kind of going like, no, give it another chance. I don't know. You've experienced this. Have you seen Better Man?
I have not. I know who Robbie Williams was before it, however, which I guess puts me in the different category of observers. So you like having like a cheering? I'm not quite sure. What do you mean?
Well, I think there's think about a lot of movies now, and it's really hard to market a movie. We can look at Megan 2.0, that just came out. Yes. They took a risk with it. I really enjoyed the movie. It's a really great action movie, and people, leaving the theater who actually went to see it, the cinema score was actually higher than for the first one. but it didn't get that viral moment. People turned against it and kind of were counting on its failure. So, it's hard to be a mainstream movie.
Well, one of the things that, I've noticed just in general is just the tribalism of turning movies into statements, or, if you support this movie, therefore you are on this side of a moral or ideological equation versus somebody else, which, can be used to an advantage of a film if they're trying to say, oh, watch this movie in order to show all those whoever's on either side what's what. Which can work as a marketing tool. It all still depends on the quality of the film, I think. At the end of the day, that only can take you so far.
Yeah, we definitely saw an uptick in sales for LEO, and I think it was because everyone's saying they want original, ideas from studios, and no one's supporting the movie. And in LA, I think a lot of people felt pressured. Okay, I need to go see it.
Right.
But I enjoyed it. But in terms of when I'm watching a movie to evaluate it for our theater, I think there's two ways I look at it for a mainstream movie, and maybe this applies a little bit to independent film as well. As I have to think the first weekend that it comes out, you're thinking, if I've never seen this movie, what would I think of it from the marketing, from the word of mouth, from what I've heard from critics, whatever, from the press campaign? How excited am I about this movie? And then once we hit Sunday, then what matters is what's the quality of the movie, who is the audience for this movie, and will they like this movie? Some movies, I know I'm not the audience for it, and if I don't enjoy it, that doesn't matter. Do I think people who like this kind of movie will like this movie? But if I'm the target audience for a movie and I don't like it, then it's not a great sign. I really try to watch everything. My friends always are surprised when I haven't seen every repertory movie ever, because I think I've grown up in the theater and I've seen everything that's been appropriate since I was born. So that's my level of expertise with the theatrical movie. And, went to film school, and during the pandemic, stuck through the Criterion collection. But, I'm still educating myself on some of these classic movies. And, it's fun to, get to go back and bring them to the big screen, because I know I want to see them, and that other people show up. Like, we're playing Speed Racer later this summer, which I've never gotten to see. I'm waiting for the opportunity to see it on the big screen. I'm really excited about that. I try to really put my own taste aside when evaluating a movie for the theater, but I love pretty much everything as long as it's a good version of that everything.
It's funny.
Yeah, there's good. Oh, sorry.
Oh, no, I was going to say, you bring up Speed Racer, which got panned, but has a huge cult following now. And I took my daughter to see Megan 2.0 because we loved the first one, and we both had a really good time. So I'm actually, it's hard to talk about that movie right now, though, because it's time and place. But Scribe, I have a question, but Scribe has a question too, so I'm going to let Scribe.
Oh, I was just going to say that I've noticed there's a couple of examples the last month or two, actually, of them re-releasing old movies from 20 or even 30 years ago now that competed with the new Hollywood stuff. When they re-released Revenge of the Sith for its anniversary, I kind of felt like it was an obligatory thing that the studio kind of had to do. Well, it's the 20th anniversary, we kind of have to do that. And yet it made more, it was number 3, I believe it was number 3 or thereabouts, on the box office for that weekend as compared to all the other Hollywood offerings. And then just last week or the week before, as a sort of promotional thing for the upcoming Spinal Tap sequel, they re-released the original Spinal Tap, and it was within the top 10 of all the other Hollywood releases. And in my mind, that kind of puts shame to a lot of the offerings from Hollywood these days, because, and I wouldn't call Revenge of the Sith a risky film. But as you're saying earlier, studios used to take risks. They used to set aside, giant swaths of money just to do like, oh, here's a $2 million movie. See what you can do with it. Or here's a $5 million movie. Instead of these $250 million, everything's banking on this one tentpole movie kind of deal. And if it doesn't go through, what are we going to do for next year? I wish studios would take more risks with not necessarily independent filmmakers, but sure, independent filmmakers, smaller productions, and give them a shot. Because that's what I remember the most about it, like walking into the video store back in the olden days. There was just everything you could imagine, like everything, and just things that felt taboo, like, ooh, should I watch that? You know, the cover art looks kind of scary. Should I see that when I'm a little kid? And I don't feel that anymore with the movies that are being put out there. They feel so safe, so predictable. You talked about weapons. Yeah, that's the best trailer advertising campaign for a film I've seen forever, because I've seen 3 different trailers, and there's already, I have seen at least 5 or 6, and I'm sure there's more, 5 or 6 different full-on 20-minute, 30-minute YouTube videos just speculating on what it could be. And you can't buy that kind of advertising. You can't pay for that kind of marketing with people being that curious about something. Of course, these days it's far more difficult to keep secrets because of the internet, because of social media, because of the spies. So if they're able to do that and keep it on a closed set and everything and keep everything locked down, well, kudos to them.
Yeah, I mean, what I'll say is I agree with you. I think it's been really difficult that we've lost the mid-budget movie.
Mm-hmm.
Like I always say, we need more comedies. People think comedies need to go to streaming. Comedies are so much funnier if you see them with other people. And we had a great experience with one of them days. But I think the hard part is we live in an attention economy, and for people to be aware of your movie, the studios have to invest a lot of marketing money into films.
Mm-hmm.
This money that they didn't have for a while, coming out of the pandemic and the strikes. So, you know, if you're going to have one thing break through, you want it to be a sure thing. So I understand where they're coming from. But I do think it's important for us to make these smaller budget movies. I think also people are scared of the scrutiny of the box office. If your, film doesn't perform to whatever the arbitrary expectation is of it, it's deemed a failure and written off. And that's scary. If I was a filmmaker, I'd be scared if I didn't make $30 million, that everyone would call it a failure regardless of the quality. So I totally get that. And I think that, but we need more comedies. We need more, romance. Every time we have it, it does well. As long as the quality is there. So, yeah, I think it's hard that we have these middle budget movies that can really over-index and move the box office, and we kind of live and die by these major tentpoles. It makes our industry really seasonal and unstable and up and down. So that's why part of my job is trying to stabilize our attendance week over week by filling in the gaps with unique content.
I had a quick question, or a couple of questions, some nuts and bolts stuff. I got some notes that Chris sent me before the interview, and I just wanted to get some more details on it if I could. And of course, correct me if I'm, overstating or summarizing things. But when it comes to advertising for these screens and the independent films, the notes say that you would invest in P&A advertising to help promote successful indie runs. So prior to a movie showing it's got legs, is the marketing fairly dependent on the filmmaker and their sort of baked-in fan base to start that ball rolling, or do you have any part in the initial advertising that this movie is available to people?
We definitely look for, an investment or partnership with the filmmaker when we start. But, I think the main way we can invest is using, the audience we have, whether that's putting materials in our lobbies that the filmmaker provides us, putting the trailer on screen where it's appropriate, or, putting the poster in our poster cases, sending it out, when we do our emails, announcing what we have going on at the theater. So really, unfortunately, we're also a tight ship. Theaters are still recovering, unfortunately, from the rough years. So, I hope that one day we'll have enough money to fly filmmakers out and put them in a great hotel and, pay up for all these advertisements for their screenings. Unfortunately, we're not there right now. But, I do think there's a lot of things we can do because we get so much foot traffic and eyes in our theater that I usually try to express to filmmakers. These are the materials that would be really helpful so that we can help you promote your movie.
And so obviously things are as they are now versus how you'd like them to be, but ideally, what is your vision for an ongoing relationship with a filmmaker or a particular film? Like if it does really, really well in one location in such a way, does it just stop its run and you part ways? Or when you say that you're a partner / investor, does that imply something more down the line?
Yeah, I mean, we really try to be responsive to, success. And, we're very nimble. I do the schedules. I look at our grosses every day. So if something's successful, I'm like, hey, do you want to take this down the road to this other theater in that community? Or are you willing to, travel the film to another place? And, it's really great that we're in, majority of the big domestic marketplaces for this industry. And we can, say, hey, this was really successful in LA. Would you want to try New York? Which New York is probably the hardest market to get into as a filmmaker. It's very inaccessible, just because there's a limitation of the number of screens and a number of theaters because rent is so high. But, like if someone personally comes to me, I want to give them the opportunity to show their movie with as many people as possible. So we definitely try to, continue the relationship and then also debrief after if we really like working together. I want to know what you have coming up next. And, we had a really great experience with the director, and then we ended up, the next few movies he had produced, we've screened all of them at our theater in LA. So, I think those relationships are important. And when someone shows you that they have a network and people I want to lean into that for sure. I also want to go back to what you said about, repertory re-releases on the theater. Those have always happened. Disney was kind of famous for this, where they'd put their movies in the vault and then they'd release them in the theater. And I think it's really important for the longevity of films that people get the opportunity to see them in the theater and bring their friends and family to them. So I really enjoy that aspect of our industry, and it's great when the studios are able to put money behind it to promote that it's happening. I know all my friends were super excited to see Prejudice in the theater when that came back out. But yeah, I think that's really fun. One of my favorite movies is The Bodyguard, and every time it screens anywhere, I always drop everything and go see it.
I had the fortune of being able to see Lawrence of Arabia remastered on like giant super screen theater.
Yeah.
And this was about 10 or 15 years ago. And the week before that, I had seen Lord of the Rings in that same theater. Wow. And I was more impressed with this, in comparison, ancient film and just the scope of it and just being able to see it. And it just felt like, that's cinema. And that's not to take anything away from Lord of the Rings, but it was a similar experience. And then I just look at the stuff that they put out these days, and it just does not meet it. It always boggles me. It's like, I can watch The Godfather, and it's like almost 3 hours long, and I can leave that movie just thinking I watched an entire world, an entire saga. I can see another movie that has the same runtime, walk out of the theater, and I don't even remember what happened in the last 10 minutes before I left the theater. It's just amazing to me what some artists can do with that amount of real estate of time that others can't or haven't been allowed to. I don't know what the magic equation is.
Definitely. I mean, I think part of it too is if we compare, back in the day before digital, movies got to stay in theaters a lot longer.
Yes.
Because film reels had to be passed around to travel, and it was just more expensive to play a movie. So things were really able to build an audience. And, there were less movies in the marketplace. And now, movies can be gone in 2 weeks if they're not successful.
Yeah.
So I think to compare because we have such a larger volume, comparing, not everything's going to be a hit. But then you look at like Sinners this year is incredible. And I think that would be a movie that's remembered for a long time and probably screened in repertory for a really long time. So, I try not to compare every movie against the standard of the great movies that have survived, because I think back in the day, hey, if something was a failure, that film reel is going back into the warehouse and we just forget about it. And now it's like there's so many public failures. I hate to put people up against that scrutiny because I want something.
I know. It's just my cynicism, I suppose.
I hear what you're saying, and I feel like it's a common sentiment I hear, but I really encourage people to, try new things. Like one of my favorite movies last year was this movie, How to Make Millions Before Grandma Dies. And it was really hard to get to theatrically because it was coming from Taiwan. But we played Monrovia Theater, and I drove an hour and a half to go see it. And it's an incredibly sad movie, but it's really worth watching. And that's another movie I'll step on the soapbox for. But because it didn't get nominated for international feature, it didn't get the recognition it deserved. So, I think part of my job is trying to curate taste and give people opportunities to see stuff that I'm really excited about that they might not get to see otherwise or be aware of otherwise.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because that kind of leads into the question that I wanted to ask you, which is, and it kind of ties into before, independent filmmakers bringing offerings that Hollywood is either not going to bring, or, not trying to compete with Hollywood, but supplement for the audience what Hollywood isn't generally bringing to them. And that's, for me, I like weird films. I'm a big David Lynch fan. I like films that are over the top. I love like old 1980s Roger Corman films where it was like, just, it'd be very sexy and violent and do these things that were outrageous, because that was the only way that they could offer something different in comparison to the movies they were usually knocking off. So, even though they were knockoff movies, they were still a lot of fun. For me, like, I want to bring to the audience, and as an audience member too, I want people to bring to me things that are like wild and outrageous but also I want to keep in mind there might be a threshold to that. You don't want to bring something to the audience that is just over the top, offensive, or so weird that they, that you lose them. How do I put this? I don't want to say how strange a movie, but like, are you looking for things that are really gonna be wild and over the top, or is there a threshold for that you see?
I really think it's important that, we're not censoring what comes in the theater. If something's propaganda that's like inaccurate, that's probably my only like boundary. But we're really open to anything, and if we think an audience will enjoy it, that's kind of just the threshold we have. And we know that we have audiences that enjoy everything from Terrifier to King of Kings, and we just have to know which theaters, which movie's going to work at. But yeah, I mean, if people leave the theater talking about a movie because they saw something incredible or so shocking, it's not the worst thing. Like, I think having a memorable experience is like the most important thing that we're looking for. So, that comes in very many different ways.
So to wrap this up, because, I don't want to take up all of your time, and Scribe and I, we can both talk about this for hours and hours. So we don't want to subject you to that. But I would like to know, just in general, what is your vision of the future in terms of theaters working with both mainstream entertainment and independent filmmakers? My personal vision is, well, I don't call it a vision. It's not something that I'm aspiring to directly, but it's my hope that entertainment becomes a bit more decentralized, so that people can maybe spend less money on movies, but not worry so much about the return because they're catering to a more niche audience, but there's still a chance for, something to break out and everybody's into it, like Terrifier. But where do you think this is going, or where do you hope this would go in terms of, for the future of your theater and how you work with both sides of the gambit?
Yeah, I mean, I really believe all ships rise together, and the film industry has been going through a rough time, as I'm sure you all know. And, we're starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel with, the big releases we've had this summer. But, I think my dream is for theaters to work together and, find movies that speak to their audience and be able to share those movies and proliferate them without, the filmmakers having a barrier to entry. I really admire the Landley family in LA. They own a bunch of independent film theaters, and if you're not aware of them, there's a documentary about them called Only in Theaters, which I think is great. Not only illuminates what they've done, but also maybe give some insight into what it means to own a theater coming out of this pandemic. But they really, were at the forefront of, advocating for filmmakers in LA and playing movies that, a lot of these, now great filmmakers, their first movies they ever did, especially foreign filmmakers that, now crossed over into Hollywood and been really successful. They were always, the ones giving them their first chance to play a movie. And so I think it's really important that we're fostering the next generation of filmmakers, and that those filmmakers, don't have to come out of a certain pipeline, that everyone has the opportunity to be that person if they have a great story or great style or, whatever it is. So I think my dream is really for us to continue to foster these relationships and hopefully watch these filmmakers grow into, ones that have their movies in 1,000 theaters and, get to, or whatever their dream is, But I think for me, it's how can we help you to, develop your audience and also just get to enjoy your movie on the big screen with, a crowd of fans. I think that's the best feeling in the world. So that's what I want to continue to do.
Well, wonderful. There's one other question that I have. I apologize because I meant to weave this in earlier and I got wrapped up in the other stuff. In terms of quality, do you have any advice? Like for me, I just wrote an article on Film Threat that was, for people who can't afford film school, but here are YouTube channels that will help you to become a better filmmaker. But in terms of, equipment used, in terms of like, I actually advocate for independent filmmakers to use AI and find out what it can do for them and bringing up their production quality. I really think there's a lot that they can do to bring a level of production value to audiences that they never could before, unless they were Hollywood. Do you have any advice for filmmakers in terms of just delivering on the quality that audiences that go to the theaters usually expect?
Totally. And I'll do a little plug for my friend Gigi Hawkins. She hosts the No Film School podcast, which I think is really informative and interviews people in various segments of the industry. And we'll be releasing her film Out of South by I Really Love My Husband in the fall. I think people will really enjoy it. So I encourage y'all to check out their website and podcast. I think it's really informative if you want to learn some skills that you would get in film school if you went to film school. I don't think you need to go to film school, even though I did. But yeah, I think the two things that can kind of betray quality or lack of budget, maybe, to me, are one, if your music feels like temp music or not fit to your film. And I think it really can take the air out of a really great scene. So I encourage people to, try to find an opportunity to get the right music, like the right score for their film. I also think that, I hate to say this because I hated being on sets when we'd like fiddle with this for hours, but I do think the lighting can make a big difference. I think a lot of filmmakers now really want like the highest quality camera. And when you have that high resolution, that Alexa Red or whatever it is, it really betrays when, everything else isn't up to par. So I'd say don't put all of your money in that bucket. I think it's okay if it has a unique feel and texture to the camera quality. So I think it's fun. I think there's a comeback of things filmed on camcorders, and I know film's really expensive, but I think don't be afraid for your cinematography to have personality, because it's really hard to achieve. Even Hollywood movies sometimes, and like the lighting on this, it's atrocious. So I think I encourage people, you don't have to use the sharpest camera that's just gonna put everything into focus.
I will add to that and say one of my favorite movies is Aliens, and that movie works with a lot of its miniature effects because of the grainy film.
Yeah.
Once they enhanced it to 4K, all the miniatures look like miniatures all of a sudden, and it completely ruined how that film felt. So I have old copies of Aliens because they look better to me than the high definition. So just to back up your point there, but go on. I'm sorry.
Oh, no. I mean, that's exactly what I'm saying. I'm like, yeah, you have less places to hide. So yeah, and I'd just say, yeah, don't spend all of your money on getting the nicest camera. At the end of the day, I think the biggest advice I can give someone is just really get your script nailed down before you shoot, because once you shoot it, hard to change things. And I think I understand sometimes people are so excited, but yeah, get your script nailed down, figure out how am I going to pitch this movie to a theater, wherever your end goal is of having the movie. Like, knowing what the movie is about and what makes it special is really important. It's hard to figure that out after you shot it. So that's my advice, I guess.
That's excellent advice. And to me, again, I'm so grateful to have you on this channel, because what I really appreciate about your point of view is, you grew up with this. So it's not just a job, it's been your way of life. I also appreciate that you're younger and you're looking at this from a different perspective, because there's a lot of people that kind of as they get older, they get set in their ways and they get very comfortable with their opinions. Even if the landscape changes, they still try to use a one size fits all mentality. So, I feel very excited listening to you talk about these things and understand the audience and understand the filmmaker. It's refreshing, because I think people get so kind of algorithm oriented that these discussions just aren't taking place very often. So I am just thrilled to hear you talk. And again, thank you for being on the show. Scribe, do you have anything you want to add before we wrap up?
No, I just appreciate your time and giving us some insight into the project and answering questions.
All right. Well, Shelby, do you have any final thoughts before we go?
Yeah, I'll just say, Look wants to be a home for movies, and I encourage everyone to keep making the movies you're passionate about. Don't make a different movie because of what I said. But we hopefully get to work with some of you guys as you develop your voice as filmmakers. I'm excited about that.
Well, I'm very excited too. Thank you so much. So this isn't the last that you've heard from Ms. Schultz. I will have an article out on Film Threat very soon, talking a bit more about this subject with some comments from some of the filmmakers who have also been working with Look. So, and hopefully that article kind of puts into sharper focus some of the reasons why I'm so excited about this. So I encourage people to check that out. I'm on Film Threat, and I'm on Substack under Christopher Moonlight Productions. And of course, Shelby's Look Cinema. We'll leave a link to their theaters in the description. And oh, by the way, Scribe, plug your channel.
Oh, I'm Scribelight. I have a YouTube channel. I do live streams about silly things. Not usually movies, but I also appear on Midnight's Edge in the morning. Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, pardon me. And we talk about movies and stuff there. So there you go.
Awesome. Both great channels. All right. Well, thank you so much. And to everyone watching, thanks for watching. I hope you'll tune in for the next videos, and I've got plenty of others for you to check out. All right. Have a great day.
Bye, guys.
All right. We're out.